stories out there.
That's a very common term. Raghead, sand monkey, carpet jockey, Haji, Lawan Hassan, Osama, Zachary bin Laden, Lawan bin Laden. I've heard everything.
Could it be possible that a US soldier who takes a solemn oath to protect and serve his country with passion, dedication, and honor, and at times even with his own life, can be taken as the enemy just because he happens to be a Muslim? This is the story of United States Army Specialist Zachary Kluwan. According to his immediate supervisor at Fort Hood, Captain Chris Arata, Kluwan has everything that the Army is looking for in a good soldier.
Just about every aspect of being a soldier, he excels. He's a very, very good soldier, very good soldier.
Zachary Kluwan is an American citizen, a first-class U.S. soldier from Alpha 45 AMD Air Missile Defense Unit at Fort Hood. Tough, smart, educated, intelligent. In fact, they say he might even be a perfect candidate for the Special Forces. But according to Specialist Kluwan, his own Moroccan heritage seems to be haunting him like a never-ending nightmare. A situation that has put him at the crossroads with the military of a country that he has sworn to protect and defend.
When I'm wearing this uniform you have on, when I have this on my sleeve, and you're gonna ask me if I'm in a terrorist organization. Because I'm Muslim. 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 Why? Apparently he drew the two words together. Apparently that's his perception.
It was about 2 years ago when Specialist Zachary Kluwan left Florida to join the US Army, something he felt extremely passionate about. He says he wanted to contribute in the war against terrorism because he cherishes the American Constitution and the freedom and liberties that come with it.
In essence, how, as cliche as it sounds, the American dream is alive. If you apply yourself, the sky's the limit. That's wonderful. And if you're not prepared to defend that, what are you prepared to defend?
We drove down to Killeen, Texas, around 1,500 miles from Washington, D.C., to the infamous Fort Hood to meet Specialist Kluwan. Fort Hood is one of the biggest Army bases in the United States, but recently it became headline news because of a horrific tragedy that took place on November 5th, 2009. Nidal Hassan, an American citizen and a major in the US Army, shot and killed 11 people at Fort Hood. But there was another story unfolding here. Long before Major Nidal took those innocent lives on a dark November day. Major Nidal's case is currently under investigation, but upon meeting Zachary on the first day of my interview with him, I was surprised what he had to say about his identity.
American soldier right now, it's, my occupation right now, and American Muslim as well.
It's funny you said American Muslim because when I talk to most of the Americans, they never say that I'm an American Christian.
Sure.
Why did you have to say that?
Especially as of late, and since I've been in the military, I seem to be explaining that a lot. Off the bat, sometimes that's a conversation starter. That is the conversation that I have with a lot of people. That is most of the conversations that I have with a lot of the guys I work with. So as of late, it's been a big topic for me, I guess.
So when people talk to you, for them, the topic of interest is that you're a Muslim.
My prior years before the military, who is Zachary Kluwan? I'd say, I love to play golf. I go to Braden River High School. I, hang out with my friends on the weekends. But that American Muslim would never come up. But I've never been under that scrutiny that I have. I've never had that in my life. I've never had that, I guess you could say, a microscope on that part of my life. But now, that's almost one or the other. It's a part of me in the military now.
No matter what Kluwan's identity is, His commander, Captain Chris Arata, is truly proud of his soldier.
Specialist Kwan is a soldier in my battery. We're an air defense artillery battery. We do Patriot. Kwan works in my orderly room. He's actually responsible for quite a few things admin-wise for my battery and does an outstanding job at it.
Private First Class Chad Jakimowicz and Specialist Arnold Mendez are Zachary's good friends, but they didn't start off as buddies.
I knew him in basic training, kind of. Like, I kind of knew him, but I really started getting to know him in AIT. It's like a military school, pretty much like a college where you learn your job.
At first, Chad seemed a little hesitant talking to Kluan, knowing that he was a Muslim. He says there was this sort of an invisible tension.
I didn't have a fear, but before I had got to know him, I guess you could say I kind of hated on him for a minute, you know, because like we're fighting against, you know, who we're fighting against, and I'm thinking, great, they're in with us now. You know, like, how are we supposed to be fighting them and they're with us? You know, but then once you know, I started talking to him, he's just been inspiring me, you know, ever since. Like, we've been really close buddies, and he's totally changed my mind about everything.
Specialist Kluan has made some pretty strong statements. According to Zachary Kluan, there is an intense harassment of Muslims in the US Army, and it has nothing to do with Major Nidal Hassan or even 9/11, according to Zachary. Zachary claims it has something to do with being a Muslim, or simply put it, with being a follower of Islam.
Most soldiers, I believe, have that perception of Islam and radicalism.
I guess subconsciously you start thinking in your head, you know, all Muslims are bad people.
You started feeling the effects of this since you joined the military.
Yeah, I'd say within the first week, there was definitely a sense of me being different.
And how's that?
You know, just upon the first week, we were at reception in my basic training unit. We were lining up after lunch, and the drill sergeants were naming off the services. And the last one that they had to offer, that was on their list that the drill sergeant was reading off, and he said it in a very sarcastic and humorous voice, and he was like, "Does anybody need to go to Islamic service?" So immediately, there was that belittling of the faith. And I raised my hand. And he was stunned. He was stunned. You know, he had to see who this guy was. He brought me out to the front. You know, this is a group of about 400 new recruits, 400 new guys. He brings me to the front. He's like, "So you're going to Islamic service?" "Yes, I am." "Yes, drill sergeant." All right. He wasn't expecting it. He didn't know how to respond. I think he felt a little uncomfortable because of how he brought it up, and immediately he's like, "Oh, okay. Well, we need to find somebody to go with you." Because you always have to have somebody go with you in basic training. And there was no other Muslims in that group. And eventually somebody raised their hand, who I'm still good friends with to this day, that decided to come with me. But that was the first week of not even knowing anything about the military. The first couple days there was this sense of being out of place in the way they looked upon me, you know. These guys in that unit who were there. And essentially these guys are looking up to that drill sergeant as a mentor, as a role model, as something eventually they'll be in the military if they, you know, work through the ranks. And for him to have that attitude, for there to be that atmosphere there, they kind of, I think they saw that, drew to it, and thought it was a normal thing. It was normal. Off the bat, I could sense a little difference in the environment.
So the other recruits picked up on that?
Absolutely.
And they said, okay, my boss is doing this to this guy, so it makes it doable for me too.
Sure. It's the cool thing to do. Apparently, it's the standard that's being set.
To embarrass an American Muslim is a cool thing to do.
Absolutely not. In that environment, at that time, in that arena, yes, absolutely. In the military right now, sure.
Kluan is not the only one who felt something totally different about being in the US Army. Others have felt the undertones as well, at least those who are willing to speak, like Chad and Arnold.
From your statement, it sounds like as if America is fighting Muslims, whereas I thought that America and the world are fighting terrorists who happen to be Muslims, and just a tiny little bunch of them.
I don't know, I guess I wouldn't really say Muslims, like it's not brought out there like Muslims, but it's like, I guess the majority of them, I guess that's almost how it's portrayed to me, I guess you could say.
U.S. Army Specialist Arnold Mendez.
You kind of get those undertones because you're going through basic training. You're being taught to fight as a cohesive unit. You're taught about brotherhood. Take care of your battle buddy. Look out for your platoon. Look out for your squad. Look out for U.S. Army. Just army of one. And then you have to come together against someone. And even though they might not come out and say we're gonna go fight Muslims, but who we have. We're two wars right now that we're fighting, and they make you feel like you're fighting against Muslims, even if they don't say those words. That's kind of like the undertones of everything that we do and everything that they say.
I still wasn't clear about what these guys meant when they said the undertones are there. So I asked Arnold again, what exactly is he trying to say?
They have the sights set up, the fob set up, and the guys who are playing the insurgents, the terrorists, whatever you want to call them, these guys are, dressed up, in a certain manner. They're portrayed to be of Muslim faith. They're not portrayed to be, just anybody. So that's why I said, it has those undertones, and I guess subconsciously you start thinking in your head, all Muslims are bad people.
And these are the guys who will be deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq, predominantly Muslim countries, and they have no idea how to differentiate between a terrorist and a regular Muslim guy or a woman.
Absolutely. I think to me that's terrifying, and it's almost hard for me to fathom, to think that, and not to say that all soldiers are feeling like that. Not all soldiers see it that way, but as most soldiers, I believe, have that perception of Islam and radicalism. They're one in their eyes.
So I put the same questions to Kluan's commander at Fort Hood, Captain Christopher Arata. He says there are good and bad people in all faith groups, but we just can't label an entire demographic just because of a few bad people.
Do you think all Muslims are terrorists? Absolutely not. It's again, it's just one of those silly notions that people come up with. It's a small percentage of Muslims, are what we consider insurgents. Anti-Iraqi or anti-Afghan forces are, absolutely. They do exist. I mean, there's no question about that, absolutely. But on the exact same token, there are Christian groups, Christian fundamentalist groups that could very easily be considered, terrorists. And, you've got groups in all faiths and all religions that some people, they interpret it, their very specific way and the way they want it to be interpreted, and they use that as an excuse, but it comes down to the individual person. It always comes down to the individual person. It's unfair to sit there and say all Muslims are terrorists if you're not going to use the exact same standard for everything else, every other religion, every other race, every other thing. And of course we don't use biases when talking about other people. We don't use stereotypes when talking about for me, I'm an Italian and I'm Irish. People don't talk about me like stereotypical Italian things or stereotypical Irish things. They just take me for who I am.
Allah Akbar.
God and Allah, they're the same person. They just have a different name.
Allah Akbar.
As a commander, my job is to set up an environment for my soldiers where they are comfortable.
Private First Class Chad Jacomovitz says that talking to your band of brothers is helpful because, according to him, before joining the army and even after spending some time as a soldier, he had a different idea about Muslims until he met Specialist Zachary Kluan.
I came in the Army and did basic training and had a whole different idea of things, you know, because of things you see on TV. But he's just kind of changed my point of view on certain things.
How did he do that?
We used to be, you know, I guess bunkmates, or, you know, we lived in the same quad, and we would just talk like about like random things. Like I would ask him about his religion sometimes, you know, and like certain things that he does, why, you know, and he would just talk to me just because I was curious, you know. Before, you know, you could say I was ignorant, you know, because you can't judge a book by its cover. Once I actually opened the book and spoke to him, you know, he just totally blew my mind.
Did he ever talk to you about Christianity?
I'm Catholic, you know, like, and he would ask me pretty much the same questions I would ask him. You know, like what is your view? And pretty much God and Allah, they're the same person. You know, they just have a different name. You know, we're all praying to the same God. He's just a different name.
It's evident that spending a little time with someone who has fears about your faith can seriously help in dispelling rumors and misconceptions. And Captain Arata believes in this concept and encourages his soldiers to talk amongst each other.
It's going to take time, bottom line. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take individual Americans and individual soldiers meeting more and more Muslim individuals and talk with them and finding out, wow, I was wrong. What was I thinking? You know, if they have those preconceived notions.
But besides experiencing individual Islamophobia from fellow soldiers, Zachary Kluan also talked about Islamophobic remarks from some members who belong to the chain of command.
To be honest with you, I really don't know. I don't know why. For instance, I don't know if it actually does happen. I don't know if Kluan's case is the only case. I don't know if there are tons of cases on Fort Hood. I really don't have that information. And
is that being investigated? There are more cases like that?
I believe so, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure, honestly. So right now, I think the main idea of Fort Hood is, you know, as a commander, you know, I talked about command climate. As a commander, my job is to set up an environment for my soldiers where they are comfortable. You know, our job in the United States Army is to train for war, and that's to fight our nation's battles. That's our job. As a commander, you know, part of that training them for war is setting up that good command climate. That climate where everybody is comfortable serving here. Everybody's comfortable around each other. Everybody can trust each other. Because when we get into combat, it's already too late.
Here's Private First Class Chad Jacomovitz talking about his and Zachary's experience when they were first deployed to Korea.
When we had first came to the unit in Korea, our first day, the first sergeant had brought us into the office. It was me, him, and PFC Garul, who we also work with. We all were new. And we were sitting down, you know, and he was talking to us, asking us where we were from and what our religious beliefs were, and, you know, everything else, and if there would be a problem with any kind of thing, you know. And Kluan had mentioned that he was Muslim. He was explaining to the first sergeant his routine, and the first sergeant had a problem with it, and he was just like, he was like, if I ever catch you doing that, you know, during the working hours, I'm going to smoke the dog piss out of you. And right as soon as he said that, I was kind of like looking at Kluan like, did he really say that? You know, like, for real? And Kluan just kind of looked at me and was just like, you know, here we go again, you know. First image, you know, first impression of this first sergeant was good until we started talking to him.
As I was trying to comprehend all the data going into my head, I asked Captain Arata again that the command climate is a very specific thing we've heard complaints of. Maybe not in his own unit, but according to Specialist Kluan and other young soldiers, there are people within the chain of command who who showed prejudice against Zachary simply because he's a Muslim.
I can't talk about what the rest of Fort Hood, and all that. I could just talk about my specific unit and stuff that I've tried to do, to implement to allow for that comfortable atmosphere, allow people to serve comfortably, and work so far for me.
The story's out there.
My intentions are to do my job and be a good soldier and contribute to the mission. That has been distorted since I've been in the military. That turned into defending myself.
Specialist Zachary Klawan is an American soldier, an American Muslim of Moroccan descent, and for the past 2 years, he's been stationed at one of the largest military installations in the U.S., Fort Hood, Texas. Zachary is well respected among his peers and his supervisors, but the reason why we drove down to Fort Hood from D.C. was to talk with Specialist Klawan and his commander about Zachary's complaints. According to Specialist Klawan, he's been harassed at the base by some soldiers and by some in the chain of command. And the reason for this, according to Zachary, is simply because he happens to be a Muslim.
So let me get this straight. In the military, what you're saying is that in the military right now, to pick on an American Muslim soldier and make fun of him is a cool thing to do. Not just an American Muslim soldier, but the faith as a whole. The Muslim faith as a whole.
Sure. It's in jokes every day. There's derogatory terms. It's everywhere. Most of the guys I met, I'm the only Muslim they've ever met in their life, let alone in the army. I've heard from a lot of people, a lot of guys that I served with, who I don't speak to anymore, who I don't have a relationship with, who thought, said, "Why are you even in the army?"
What do you mean by that?
Exactly what they said. Why are you in the army? And that's what your reaction was. The same reaction I had. What do you mean? We're on the same team, and I joined the army for the same reason I hope you join the army, to protect freedom, to protect this way of life. I cherish this way of life here that we have here. It's an amazing sense of freedom. In their eyes, I was a Muslim, and there was no differential in their thought process, in their reality, that there was no differential between terrorist and Muslim. In their eyes, it was the same thing. And maybe more than half of those that I educated very quickly upon debate or just upon normal conversation, I dispelled some rumors. I answered some of their questions, and immediately a lot of these guys picked up and they were very accepting, just treating me like one of the guys. But then there was that group that didn't. But initially, I'd say as a whole, that group had that perception that the word Muslim and the word terrorist were the same. They were connected directly.
But Zachary's supervisor and commander, Captain Christopher Arata, an Iraq War veteran, says that nothing of the sort is happening in his unit. He can't speak for the entire U.S. Army or for Fort Hood.
I can't talk about what the rest of Fort Hood, and all that. I could just talk about my specific unit and stuff that I've tried to do, to implement to allow for that comfortable atmosphere, allow people to serve comfortably, and work so far for me.
Specialist Zachary Klawan's close friend, Private First Class Chad Jacomovitz, has been there with him in many of these alleged instances. As time progressed, the harassment turned into something more aggressive.
One time, me and him were going to do our laundry, and we had walked in there, and all of a sudden we see some kind of papers on the ground, like ripped up, like somebody just made a mess for no reason. We walk in there, and it was his Quran, his book, almost like his Bible, was just ripped up, was like torn to shreds, and that set me off. Just because the man's Muslim, you know, just because his Bible doesn't look like your Bible, you know, it doesn't mean that you have to, discriminate him. You know, you don't even know the guy.
Kluwan argues that spending time with some folks doesn't really mean that it will impact a whole lot of people. To find the moral compass, he says, there needs to be a collective effort by the United States Army to help address the misconceptions that the soldiers or their commanders might have about Muslims, because not doing so is creating an environment of fear.
Do you think it's because of lack of information? I mean, people will spend time with you and then they get to know, this guy seemed like a pretty normal guy to me, doesn't look like a terrorist. Did that help in changing perceptions?
Sure, with that small, immediate group that I got to impact directly. When I came in the Army, 2008, I came in the military, and I went through the, I guess you could say, the lack of education on that subject, or maybe just the ignorance, or, you know, in reality, racism that I went through. I wasn't prepared for that coming in the military. Because the society I came from in Tampa, I never one day went through that. Post 9/11, I didn't go through that. And it was mind-blowing coming to the military and just having that environment, like, wow.
And then there was another thing. In the Army, it's known as cultural training, to help young recruits and soldiers understand the enemy or the region in order for them to handle situations once they are deployed.
Their culture training, they picked him to be the head, the head terrorist, just because of what his ethnicity was, and that he could speak the Arabic language. They picked him out. It wasn't like I volunteer, I'll do it, because look at me, I'll do it. They picked him out of all the people that was there. They're picking people, and he happened to be one of the first people that was picked to do that. And I'm shooting my battle buddy.
Captain Chris Arata says that he doesn't think any of this was intentional or on purpose. Every soldier's skill set is useful for the military.
I would bet any money in the world that the individuals who, asked Kluwan that, I don't think they were intentionally trying to, slight Kluwan or hurt his feelings or anything like that. I think they were really trying to get as realistic a training event as they could. I doubt they realized what they were doing to Kluwan. Now, when Kluwan brought it up, that's a different story.
It did affect him psychologically.
Absolutely, and we know that now. And so, really what that comes down to is, hey, lesson learned.
Having a Latino heritage, specialist Arnold Mendez asked what would happen to him if America were to go to war with Mexico.
That just tells me, it's crazy hypothetical, but if we were to go to war with Mexico, that means that all the Hispanics are going to be targeted or singled out, or we're going to be the bad guys. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Were they picking him for the sake of, picking him because he was Muslim, or for the training? I mean, it's hard to say, but at the same time, it's just like there's so many people you could have picked. Why pick him? Does he have a deeper insight into being a terrorist than anybody else? I mean, he needs that training just like everybody else needed training.
I asked Mendez and Chad if they had heard of these cultural training slides that the military uses in their cultural training workshops.
Did you guys come across any kind of slides that say that all Muslims are wanting to kill Americans or Westerners?
I was there when one time with Kluwan we were doing our quarterly training, and they were talking about cultural sensitivity, and they were talking about what the belief of the enemy is and what they believe towards us. And then one of the slides, it just kind of made, like, from reading it, you made the assumption that all Muslims it was their duty to kill Americans or to kill infidels, whatever it was. And like I remember, I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember what I do remember was Kawan reading that, and automatically, like he was heated because he saw this and he was looking around, and a lot of these guys were looking at this training and they were just taking it in. They didn't know any better. They didn't question it. It was just like, okay, it is every Muslim's right to kill Americans or to kill U.S. soldiers. And I'm like, whoa, that's a fallacy of moral reasoning. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Allah Akbar. This is the direct slide that I saw. I'm reading it. We're sitting there. The guy's like, next slide. Allah Akbar. It is the duty of all Muslims to kill all Westerners and Americans. I'm sitting in that crowd like, are you kidding me?
I asked Zachary's commanding officer, Captain Chris Arata, about this cultural training and the slides.
You're very right. There are some publications out there, some training material that is dated. Some of the training is poor, some of it's great. I mean, it just depends on, who made up the actual material. It's kind of one of those things you kind of got to update as you go. You hope that you have a good policy in place, and hey, if it's not, a good policy, then we can focus on that, switch that up, change it up, good to go. But, I think you're very, very right. Some training materials, definitely, especially in our instance, you got to get that information out there. And I know one of the biggest things that, we teach all the time is that, it's the same that, it's wrong to kill in, Christianity and Catholicism, it's the exact same thing, in Islam. And, a lot of soldiers, they don't understand that. They really don't know it. And so you got to kind of teach them that sort of thing. But, going even into further detail, absolutely, I think it's highly necessary. But you kind of got to go through the basics first and kind of work your way up to that. If you're someone that doesn't, like somebody from the faith of Islam or, from the faith of Christianity or whatever, a 5-minute class probably isn't going to change your mind,
Specialist Tuan describes how he felt when he came across those slides for the first time during his cultural training.
When these training sessions that we have go on, and I'm looking at this cultural training, and you'll have brief cultural training. Nothing in depth. Nothing in depth thus far since I've been in the military. But what we do get is at best terrible information. It's terrible information.
How's that?
They give a slide show on terrorism. Show all the terrible things, all the terror attacks. A bunch of these, radical guys, quotes from these radical guys, all these pictures, bodies on the floor. And then immediately after, maybe we'll have a slide and these guys are Muslim. There's no, where's the connection? There is no connection. But there's a direct connection in these slides. And it's like, they show a slide. This is the direct slide that I saw. I'm reading it. We're sitting there. The guy's like, next slide. It is the duty of all Muslims to kill all Westerners and Americans. Next slide. I'm sitting in that crowd like, are you kidding me? What? Who's putting this together? That's first of all, who said that? Who's putting this together? What is that? This is completely false. But now I have fellow guys in the crowd who know I'm Muslim, who don't know too much about Islam, who look at me and they saw this slide. So you want to kill me? No.
They asked you that?
Sure. Numerous people. Numerous. No. I don't know where that came from. And I dug. I was asking questions. Where is this? It was a quote from Osama bin Laden.
Did they say that it's a quote from Osama?
Not on the slide. There was no quotation. Not on the slide. It was just a slide. A fact to see. 2 + 2 = 4. I don't know anything about Islam. These guys sitting in the crowd, you know, I wasn't mad at these guys for coming up and asking me. I wasn't. I was mad that the slide was shown because somebody put this together. Somebody was in charge of putting this together. Somebody was appointed over him. And somewhere in between there, somebody has a clue on what's going on. Somebody knows what's going on.
We tried to find out more about those slides, but no one had any answers. And those slides are nowhere to be found. I asked Zachary's commander, Captain Chris Arada, if the U.S. Army is at war with Islam, as claimed by Specialist Kluan.
The United States Army is not fighting a war against Islam.
No, of course not.
Like some of the people are saying.
No, not at all. I mean, obviously, I can't comment on what you know, I'm not smart enough to figure out exactly what we're, you know, what the thought processes are, you know. But I know when I was in Iraq, you know, it was protecting the populace. It was creating a safe, you know, and stable environment for the populace, a democracy over there. You know, so to say it's a war against Islam, that's just pure and utter silliness.
Captain Arada says that claiming that this is a war against Islam is like being those who say that all Muslims are terrorists.
And it comes right back down to, you know, those individuals that have preconceived notions about Muslims, you know, and Islam, you know, being a religion of terrorism, are, you know, no better than the individuals that think the United States military is in a war against Muslims. I mean, it's just silliness. You know, you're making a preconceived notion about something you just don't understand.
But when I put this to Specialist Zachary Kluan, he said that the reason why he joined the army was to fight terrorism and preserve the American liberties.
According to officials at Fort Hood and other military spokespersons, they have said that this is not a war against Islam, or this is not a war against Muslims.
I knew ultimately what the military's objective was in the war in Iraq. If I thought it was a war on Islam, why would I have enlisted? I knew what the big picture was. I dug, and you know, I watched the news, and I was understanding what's going on. I was digging. I was asking recruiters. But when I got there, when I got to basic training, and I'm looking at these slides, how you just put it is what should be in a slide. But in reality, that's not what's there.
Zachary says that things got worse after the Fort Hood massacre that took place in 2009. Prior to that, he said he had faced verbal abuse, slurs, and other sorts of discrimination, but never a threat at his own doorstep. Chad Jacomovitz, Zachary's friend and his bunkmate at the time, describes what happened.
The most recent was when when people had come to my barracks room, you know, in his barracks room, because we share the same room, and had kicked or knocked, hit the door real loud, you know, and woke him out of a sound sleep, and had left a note on the door, you know, and it was very derogatory, very racist.
Allah Akbar. That's a very common term, raghead. A lot of these are very ignorant names. Allah Akbar. Raghead. It was, obviously I don't wear a rag on my head now, but it's derogatory.
On a Monday night at 2 a.m., Zachary jumped out of his bed because there was someone banging on his barracks door, kicking hard and kicking loud.
What happened that night?
I was sleeping. Just like, you know, it was a normal night, I was sleeping. And in the middle of the night, I was waking up by a loud beating. Maybe a knocking or a kicking at my door. So I got up, I put some clothes on. I went to open the door, and a note fell. You know, I looked down the hallway, I picked the note up, and I opened it up, and it reads, "You raghead, burn in hell."
Raghead.
Raghead.
But you don't wear a rag on your head.
That's a very common term, raghead. But a lot of these are very ignorant names. raghead. It was, obviously I don't wear a rag on my head now, but it's derogatory. And those are the type of names that have been, I'm Muslim, and they associated raghead with Muslim. Obviously this individual is not educated, obviously knows nothing about me or Islam or what I believe or what the teachings are, but he knows I'm Muslim, so he wrote raghead. That's the comparison in words I'm speaking about, the comparison in thoughts, the perception. It all ties into the perception.
And people have used they've used these words to address you directly?
Unfortunately, yes. Guys I work with.
At Fort Hood?
Yes. I had my first sergeant, which is the highest ranking individual appointed over me at that unit, ask me in front of the group if I was involved in a terrorist organization. When I'm wearing this uniform you have on, when I have this on my sleeve, and you're gonna ask me if I'm in a terrorist organization, because I'm Muslim. Why? Apparently he drew the two words together. Apparently that's his perception.
Did you try to address it? Did you tell him that, you know, you can't do that, sir?
That's not the reality of the military. Eventually, I filed a complaint on the issue, but there's military courtesy. A private in the United States Army is not going to speak up and just tell a first sergeant, hey, first sergeant, what do you mean? It doesn't happen.
I asked Captain Arata what he and his team felt when they found out that somebody had left a threatening note on Specialist Klawan's door.
When this happened, this situation, a very, very recent situation, happened, obviously it upset me immensely. It upset the rest of the battery, his teammates in my battery, and obviously everybody's very supportive of him in our battery and his faith and what he does. And everybody really, they don't know him because he's Muslim, they know him because he's a great soldier. And so when something like that happens, it's just a shame. It really is, just a shame.
Specialist Arnold Mendez says that the military needs to be more transparent about these issues.
Everybody has to know that it happened so that we can make ourselves better, so that we can be a better army. We could be a more progressive army, better thinking army, and an army that's more integrated than the army that was yesterday.
I start speaking French, she starts speaking really fast. I'm not going to understand anything.
I did try to talk to other officials from the U.S. military, but did not get any response from anyone else other than Captain Arata. I asked him if the U.S. military had contingency plans to help address issues of religious or ethnic discrimination, or is it understood that things like these will happen and nothing can be done?
The fact of the matter is, we would love to be able to say that this is never going to happen. Never, ever, ever going to happen in the United States Army. We're just that disciplined, we're that awesome, and we are an incredibly disciplined force. But to be able to say that that's never going to happen, it's just silly. I mean, it's wishful thinking. Things are going to happen, and we do have policies in place to attempt to prevent those situations. We kind of hope that by the time they get to the unit, they will have learned enough about each other and about all these different cultures that stuff won't happen. But the fact of the matter is, it will. It's going to happen. You're going to have those onesies and twosies out there that they just they don't understand. They have preconceived notions, and they act on those preconceived notions until they find out better, until those preconceived notions are challenged.
I know technically that we're fighting a war on terror, but I don't see terror as Islam. Islam is peace.
Some of them don't even realize they're being disrespectful. Some of them don't even realize it, and it kind of takes someone talking to them about it. And most people, once they learn, they're perfectly fine.
Specialist Arnold Mendez and PFC Chad Jacomovitz also claim that the U.S. Army hasn't done enough and needs to do more about religious discrimination within the U.S. military.
To be fair to the Army, they're saying that we are doing our best, we've got protocols in place, investigations being done, and things are being addressed, issues are being addressed, And at the same time, you know, if you look at the civil rights movement, it took 50, 60, 70 years for people's perceptions to be changed, and it's still in the process of being changed.
That's the Army's way of sweeping shit under the rug, just like I told you.
Captain Arata says that even though protocols are in place to address such issues, but there's no guarantee that things like these won't happen again.
Again, that falls under the cross-section of society, you know, clause, I guess you could say. You know, the fact is that we try our hardest as a military to prevent that sort of stuff from happening. But you can't stop everybody. And you can't, you know, kind of have your eyes everywhere. We try our hardest, but it's just not possible. And some of them don't even realize they're being disrespectful. Some of them don't even realize it. And, you know, it kind of takes someone talking to them about it. And most people, once they learn, they're perfectly fine. You know, oh, okay, I get it. You know, I was being an idiot. I'm sorry.
Specialist Klawan is adamant on believing that when it comes to Islam or Muslims, there's a double standard in the US.
Well, protein shake, 2 of these a day, meal replacement.
Because according to him, the image of Islam is directly and deliberately being connected with terrorism on a national scale.
Are you trying to say that there is a campaign to belittle or embarrass Muslims or corner them and attack Islam so that they can develop a negative image of that faith and the people who follow that faith?
I would say, not just in the military, but in society. But I see it in the military. There's a double standard. What's the difference between this militia that was just discovered in Michigan and a radical organization in Iraq or Afghanistan? What's the difference?
Difference of faith?
That's it.
Both are terrorists, but one is...
But one's not called a terrorist because that word is directly associated with Islam as a view, as the media's view, as what I've seen, I guess the military's view, unfortunately. It's the reality of it. It's not my view.
But critics would argue that most of the killings right now in the world are being done by radical Muslims.
I cannot justify that. I don't agree with it.
Why?
It's unjust. I would never, ever act out in that manner. Ever. It's not correct. It's not peaceful. It's not correct. It's inhumane. It has nothing to do with Islam. Nothing. It has as much to do with Islam as the Aryan Brotherhood has to do with Christianity. You ask a faithful Christian, well, why are these Aryan brothers doing this? They're gonna just, that conversation over real quick. There's a fine line. There's a fine line. And I don't know where the lack of communication is happening. Because I know technically that we're fighting a war on terror. But I don't see terror as Islam. Islam is peace.
Captain Arata argues that he relies on the soldiers and on the commanders like himself to create a comfortable atmosphere for all.
You know, we do have training set up, but it really, you know, we rely on the individual soldier. We rely on, you know, commanders like myself to set up a command climate where soldiers can do that, where they have that dialogue to be able to talk to each other.
As an American citizen, Specialist Mendez says it's demeaning to watch a battle buddy insulted like that. He wants something done about it.
If we're not practicing what we preach, what are we saying to these nations? What are we saying to the rest of the world who's looking to us to lead, you know, as the United States Army?
Despite all the back and forth, despite all the bitterness, and despite what the odds are, Zachary says there's hope.
One of the soldiers who was shot by Major Nadal actually sent you an email and try to connect with you and understand what you're going through. Doesn't that show that even some people at the soldier level are not playing the same game?
Absolutely. That's great. I know there's hope within the ranks. There is. I could tell from the immediate group that I've impacted, from day one to where I am today, in my relationship with these, guys and girls, who at one point just looked at me kind of, oh, okay, this guy's Muslim, and some of them wary, some of them just straight up disrespectful, to hanging out with me now, to trusting me, to being no different from the next guy, due to the fact of me just talking to them. Just simple education, basic things. There is hope.
Specialist Klawan argues that his efforts are simply to address the system and to make sure that being an American Muslim soldier won't be as tough for others as much as it has been for him.
Right now, things are difficult. And if it makes things difficult for me, sure, okay. Things are already bad. If you want to make my life a living hell, go ahead. But implement change for those other, for the next Specialist Klawan, for the next Private Klawan that comes in the army, who happens to be Muslim.
Imran Siddiqui, Muslims America, Urdu VOA, Fort Hood, Texas.